Hello and welcome to Before You Knew Me, the podcast that delves into the profound stories that often go untold. In this episode, we are joined by Denton Knapp, a man whose life is a tapestry of service, sacrifice, and resilience. Denton's narrative is a powerful reflection of dedication and leadership. A West Point graduate who has served in the field for 30 years, experiencing the deep challenges of separation during multiple tours. He understands the toll that service takes on families. His personal journey through loss with the son of his suicide has fueled his passion for suicide prevention and support, not just for veterans, but their families as well. Denton's story is one of navigating transitions, building community support systems, and advocating for comprehensive care. Stay with us as we explore the life of a man who's dedicated to the betterment of veterans' lives, believing in the strength of unity and the importance of acknowledging every veteran's service. Denton, thank you so much for joining us today on this wonderful podcast of Before You Knew Me, because after this, you all are going to be able to know a lot more of Denton Knapp. So Denton, if you'd go ahead and introduce yourself to us, please.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me on here. I'm Denton Knapp. I'm a Gillette, Wyoming native. Grew up here and went to Camp County High School, but then at the age of 18, I took off for West Point, New York, and went to the United States Military Academy there for 4 years. And from that time, I went and served 30 years out in the active Army. All different installations, deployed to Kuwait, Afghanistan, Iraq, just all over the place, Saudi Arabia. And then made the transition after 30 years, really 34 if you count West Point, doing military service to go into the civilian world. And what that was like for me for 4 years. And then this time after, I did retire in 2017. And since then, I've taken a great interest in continuing service in different realm, some public service, as well as working our commissioners, and then also moving on to help veterans in our community.
Yeah.
So that's really where I'm focused on. The important things about me is I'm a husband, I'm a father of 2 boys, and also 2 grandchildren, a beautiful daughter-in-law. So that's my highlights. I'm the oldest child of 5, and my dad, his great-grandfather, well, my great-grandfather, his grandfather homesteaded here in Wyoming in 1901.
That's amazing.
So, and my mom came from Japan.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, that's, homegrown in Wyoming.
That's my life in a nutshell.
That's perfect. Well, it's not every day that 2 Wyomingites get to come from Gillette and talk on this national worldwide podcast. That's pretty special. That is awesome.
It is special. And that's why when I saw you were doing this, I thought I need to get on there and talk to her, get the message out about our veterans and what's going on, and really, building an understanding with the community on who we are and what we're about. Well,
and that is the biggest reason why I'm so excited, because I do love every veteran out there. I love everyone who's in active service. I love just anyone who's willing to fight for my freedom, that I'm not out there doing it myself. And so there's so much appreciation. So I'm excited to dive into this. And I know that, Denton, whenever you and I previously discussed, you actually went through a congressional run, and that really started a beautiful transition into being able to benefit veterans in a whole different way. And so I'd love for you to just kind of start with that, and we'll kind of go from there and explain how the congressional campaign really motivated you to represent the veterans.
Sure. It's always a tough decision when you serve that long in the Army, and then all of a sudden you want to run at the national level for a U.S. congressional seat. And we only have one in Wyoming, of course. And, it's something I'd always considered, even growing up, about that type of service. My brother, Christopher, he was county commissioner for 12 years, and he's currently down at our Wyoming State Legislature as a representative. And just kind of watching him go through that process. And then on the national level, seeing all the recently returned veterans from Operation Iraq and Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom Afghanistan come back and join the Congress or the Senate. And we're at the lowest number we've ever been since post-World War II of having members of the military veterans actually serve in U.S. Congress and Senate. Wow. So it's starting to climb back up, but we're at the lowest it's ever been. And most of those folks were from Vietnam era and Korean War era.
And when they got all done, they were like, I'm going to come back and make a difference. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And often encouraged by, other people in the public to run for service. They understand the experience you have internationally
Right.
and with national policy and other things that fit right in, whether you have any local experience or state experience or not. And a lot of people ask me that, why you start at the top? Why don't you start, at the city or the county? And I said, because there's not time.
Yeah.
There's not time for that right now. We need change to happen. And of course, the big dispute for Wyoming was the Congressman Liz Cheney when she was in there, and just the whole political uproar on that. And I thought it's time for Wyoming to heal and to make a difference where I could immediately at that level. So I did run. I think there were 8 people in the field at that time. Yeah. And I went through the entire process. I got a chance to debate all the candidates, to include our current Congresswoman Harriet Hageman and Liz Cheney and a handful of others, and I learned a lot. I did not win the election, of course, but it drove me to continue to figure out how I could still serve in that realm. And I told Congresswoman Harriet Hageman, I said, I don't think anybody else in the National Center Congress has served 30 years active duty.
Yeah.
So I said, you've got any questions about veterans or active, call me. There's my number. And we've kept that relationship going. In fact, as I mentioned, Sunday, I'm going to DC to serve the VFW for the state of Wyoming, along with the other 50 states. And I'll get to see both our senators and congresswomen while I'm there. So that kind of led to that service part. I can talk a little about the history. I did have 4 years of civilian employment before I ran for Congress. And that was also in the veteran realm. So we can talk about that too.
Yeah. So speaking of that, like I love the fact that you're out there, like you came back and you were just jumping head on in. And I know that there's a story behind that. And we're going to get to that here in a second. But I would love to hear just kind of your reflection on your time at West Point and like your 30 years of service. Like, what was that like? Because I've never been.
I grew up Campbell County High School in Gillette here, probably from about the time it was 4,000 people up to 34,000 now. But growing up in my neighborhood, we were outside all the time, playing, camping, doing all kinds of things, Cub Scouts, athletics, did track and football, and really dreamed about serving in the military from the time I was like in elementary school. And, I tell people that's a critical time because that's when you dream about what you want to be. I always tell the recruiters that, hey, hitting the high schools is too late. Yeah. You got to start down in the elementary schools and junior high. That's when you're dreaming about what you want to do.
True.
And that's when you start shaping your school, your civic service, other things towards that, and hopefully have some mentors to help you out.
I was going to say,
that point,
was there a like special person that you saw when you're in elementary school that made it like, I want to go do this?
Well, growing up, I played a lot of Army.
Okay.
No kid says, let's play Navy. So we played a lot of Army in the yard, and did all that kind of stuff. And I had an interest in it. My next door neighbor, Mike Barlow, who was a year ahead of me, actually went to the Air Force Academy for the first year there. And I watched him go through that, and I thought, well, I think that's what I wanted to do too. And so I did apply junior year to all the service academies. So West Point, Navy, Air Force, and Coast Guard Academy, and Merchant Marine Academy. And it's a process to go through because you really start your junior year as far as admissions process. And you do have to have a senatorial or congressional nomination.
Oh, wow.
And you actually go through an interview process. So not only do you have to clear the state level to be nominated, but you also then have to meet the requirements medically, physically, academically, and leadership-wise, civic, for the admissions into the academy. And you're competing against thousands and thousands of applicants, and normally they select about 1,000 per class, at least at West Point.
Wow.
And so it's very tight. In Wyoming, we only have 2 senators and 1 congressman. And because of that, they only get so many selections from Wyoming. So normally there's 3 new Wyoming people that go into a West Point class of 1,000.
What? Yeah. I have never known that. What? My
So you become
brother
very close.
had the opportunity to go to West Point. I did not realize how incredible this was.
Yeah, so I had Casey Wood from Lander and Mike Young from Powell that I went there
Wow.
with, and it's a process getting there. So you mentioned mentors and things. I really took it on myself, but I had a great help from Nancy Roberts, who was our guidance counselor at the time, to help me really push things into the process and get it going for me. You had to collect just tons of recommendation letters from teachers, coaches, clergy, bosses, all that kind of thing, get those in.
Yeah.
And then a lot of essays, of course, in those days, handwritten on what you wanted, why you wanted to go and serve, and why the particular at that academy,
Yeah.
and get all that package in. So you really got to start at the beginning of your junior year to get all this done before the selection time and your attendances after your senior year. I had a couple lead-ins to that. My junior year, I actually went to Japan as an exchange student for the summer, and it was a special program, Youth for Understanding, where they chose one boy and one girl from every state. So I had a girl from Torrington that went, and myself, and then two from every state. We went to Japan for 3 months and lived with host families there. And that was the first time I'd been out of Gillette, out of the country. And so that was a learning experience. Couldn't speak Japanese, although my mom's from Japan.
Yeah.
And got an opportunity to go to school there and do sports there and just really learn what it's like to be out on your own. And so that gave me an opportunity to do that before I went to West Point.
Wow.
So that process was interesting. I remember driving to Casper with my dad and staying at Uncle Abe's, and went into the congressional office here in Casper, and a bunch of other kids in the waiting room, and actually going in, and I had a big conference table with staffers and everybody for the senators and congressmen asking all these questions. And after that, you leave and wait to see if you got the nomination. It was interesting. I'm sitting in history class in Gillette, and comes a loudspeaker from Mrs. Sharkey. We need Denton Knapp to come down to the principal's office. He's got a phone call. She goes, he'll come after class. And they said, it's from Senator Wallop's office. And she goes, oh, he'll be right there. So I found out I got appointed.
That's amazing. I love that.
But I had a choice. I got accepted to every academy, a nomination to every single one from all the senators. So I had a choice. But the choice was limited as I went down for my medical physical down in Cheyenne. They disqualified me for color vision deficiency, red-green color deficiency. So I got the plate test where you got to see all the dots and pick the numbers. I could see about half of those.
Wow.
And the alternate test was a Farnsworth Lantern, and they failed me 3 out of 3 on that. So immediately stamped non-aviation qualified. And I'd always dreamed about flying. My preference was Air Force Academy. And so that Navy said, no, you can't even come. Coast Guard said no. Air Force said you can come, but you can't fly. And West Point said, Army will take you, come on over. So that was a process. It had to be a medical waiver. And so I went through as a junior high school senior, through the process of waiting and wondering and, having to get exceptions to policy and everything to get in. And that was the only thing holding me back. I also applied to all the universities, University of Wyoming and other places, for their ROTC programs, because I knew that was an alternate way to become an officer. And that applies most of our officers for all the services, the Reserve Officer Training Corps programs at the universities.
Wow.
So that's how I got in there. The West Point experience itself. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I have to ask, because it must be, coming down to the health side of things, like you must be, like tip-top shape, right? To get into the Air Force, it seems.
Was that past tense?
No, it's still the same, right? But the reason I say that is because I've actually heard about a lot of people that were like, I want to go into the Air Force, and they were not able to make it, right? And that has to be so disheartening. Like,
it is. It's crushing, because it's your dream in front of you.
Right.
And whether your SAT isn't good enough, or you couldn't do enough pull-ups on the pre-exam, or, color vision kept you from doing something.
Did you even know you had a color vision issue?
Not really. You got an optometrist as a kid, and I knew I had eyeglasses and contacts, but I never knew that,
like it was never something so significant. They were like, wow, exactly. I can't decipher the difference.
Yeah. Where I met all the other qualifications, but that took me out of 2 academies.
Wow.
Immediately. and flying. I couldn't fly, so now I jump out of them. But that
Mhm.
was a
Wait,
tough
what?
decision too. But I
Just
did
for
have
fun, you
my
jump out of
guidance
planes?
counselor. Yeah, my guidance counselor Nancy Roberts helped me immensely. Helped me meet the deadlines and timelines to get things in.
Yeah.
And nobody really understood. The coaches, West Point, you're going to have blasts here, and they knew about Army football and that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
beyond that, nobody really could talk to me about going there or the service. My grandfather was in World War II
Mm-hmm.
and never talked about it. In fact, the only advice he
Really?
ever gave me, anything about the military, was he said, Dent, when you go there, he said, the sergeant will ask for volunteers. They'll say, we need truck drivers. And you raise your hand, and then they give you a wheelbarrow. So he said, don't volunteer for nothing. Said, thanks, Grandpa. And Dad had served in the Air Force for 4 years before I was born and never really talked about it. I saw his uniforms hanging in the closet. It was 4 years that he served, and never knew much about it. So it was all kind of grown up, military thing was kind of cool to be. It was service, and it was a great time. That was during the Reagan years, and money was flowing, and the military is built up, and it was just a good time to come into service.
Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, like, did you ever ask them about it and they still didn't talk to you much about it? Like, is that, or it just was a matter of?
No, and unfortunately I didn't ask,
Okay.
and I wish I would have, especially Grandpa, because he's gone.
Yeah.
And, I finally got Dad talking about his time and learned a lot of things I didn't know, and looked at pictures, and found the pictures had a story behind them.
Yeah.
So, I tell everybody that's important. Talk to your grandparents, talk to your parents, and ask them those questions. On Amazon now, they've got these starter cards with like 200 questions to ask old people.
What?
Yeah, and you pull them out, and it's like, what's your favorite memory for Christmas growing up?
Oh my God.
What was your first car? Tell me about your first girlfriend. And you pull those out, and they're conversation starters to get the questions we never ask.
That's
of
amazing.
Our grandparents or parents.
Yeah.
So there's a plug for those cards.
I can tell. Yeah, there you go. We'll make sure the link is below somewhere. I will tell you I love that beyond what words can say, because I have a very, very, very special place in my heart for the elderly that, especially they don't have someone, they're in the nursing home. It's just not, maybe they never expected to be there. Like I've done in-home healthcare for, gosh, over 11, 12 years now. Usually it is tough. And I anymore, I usually get called in for like end of life care. And that is really where it's not for the faint of heart by any means. And it's definitely not easy, but I will tell you. And so I'm going to go off my soapbox with old people here soon. But it is so important to them to even just have conversation, even if you have to keep bringing up questions. And so those cards, I think, are amazing. Like I can ask questions all day long. That's what makes me so good at this. But I know that that's not something that everybody just can do. And so I'm going to make sure we find those cards, because that is awesome.
Yeah, I'll have to see that link.
Yeah.
One of the things, I look back at my great grandmother's photos, and you think about that in the 1900s, 1920s, 30s, they're using those pictures, that you have to wind up and you're looking down on. But she had so many pictures, just tons of pictures. And I thought, how do you get all these developed back then and everything? But she's got all these photo albums filled with those. But she painstakingly wrote on the back of everyone who they were and what was going on and the date.
That's incredible.
Now, our grandkids are going to get a digital, thumb drive of 30 pictures of your breakfast and you at the gym, and it's like here's grandma homesteading in 1901 out on a cheetah road in Fortification Creek, digging their house out of the side of a hill and picking up what driftwood they could from the creek and making a house,
right,
and then riding their first baby back on horseback through the snow to the house. And then those are good pictures.
Yes, they
Ours
are.
Gonna be tough to explain to our kids and grandkids.
Oh, and it's so true. I mean, even to this day and age, like with the nieces and nephew that I have right now, I don't feel that old, Denton, at all. And so I'm like, it is a whole new world that they are growing up in. And I can't imagine, I have to tell you that when my parents bought their ranch over in Hewlett and they lived next to Bruce McAmis, and man, that man had the mind of a steel trap. Like he could remember things like, wait, and the years of worldly conflict that he went through within his I think he passed away at 94, but the years, I mean, Dust Bowl, Depression, the World Wars, like all of the things, like he lived through it, and he just had story after story after story. And so it really is incredible to be able to ask those questions.
It is. And growing up, getting back to that West Point thing, I didn't really have those stories.
Yeah.
And right now I say, veterans, it's our fault because we don't tell our stories. We're a humble profession. You're used to doing your mission, no fanfare, going on the next one. Okay. And we don't tell our stories. And because of that, we have a lack of understanding between the military profession and the rest of society. And I'm not sure what it was back then, but now you think about it, less than 1% of our U.S. population are in uniform right now. Less than 1%.
Really?
And for veterans, the national average bounces between 7 to 8% of our national population are veterans, and that's World War II till now. In Wyoming, we have 11% veterans. So it says something about our culture here, and choices that people choose to make about growing up here in the great state of Wyoming.
I was going to say, especially since we have more cows than people.
That's right, and antelope. Antelope too.
Oh, antelope takes the cake. I wonder, there's probably more antelope than there are cows. But
we have over 1 million antelope.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And yes, and I know that was a big reason, Denton, that you were so gracious enough to come on here and tell your story, to not only encourage other people to tell theirs, but it really is something. It's a lost art. Storytelling is a lost art, and it's therapeutic in so many ways. And you never know who else you're going to either inspire or help or heal through the storytelling process. And
that's true. And, we have a shortage of behavioral health folks and counselors. And you think about it, any of us could be a counselor. It just takes somebody to listen to people so they can get it out and have somebody else understand what they've gone through, what they're talking about. So the fact that the phones now and technology kind of inhibits us really from having those face-to-face conversations, especially with a total stranger. Nobody turns to your side and say, hi, what do you do? Here's who I am. Where are you from? Where are you going?
Yeah.
Nobody does that. Everybody's got their face on their phone. I mean, stop sometime at an airport or something, just stand there and look around. And everybody's like this.
Yeah.
So, evolution, our necks are going to be bent and we're going to have huge thumbs in the future. But
I rebuke that. No, we will not. But it is a lost art, and I would actually love to now jump into your story, Denton, because I think this is just a perfect situation or flow for it. But I would love for you to actually start with meeting your wife, because I think it's a beautiful story.
I will.
If there's anything beforehand that you wanted to throw in there, go for it.
Well, I tell you, so leaving Gillette my senior year, all on my own, flying over to New York, and staying the night in New York City by myself for the first time, hooking up with a roommate who was, his family was from Croatia, actually.
Oh, wow.
And he was the first guy I ever met, going to West Point before we got on the bus next morning and drove through the gate.
Yeah.
But one of my last semesters of high school, we had a new guidance counselor, not the one who helped me get in, but a new one.
Okay.
And she actually tried to talk me out of my West Point appointment.
Really?
She said, you're not a military type. You won't do well there. You need to go to a college or university. And I'm like, well, it's considered an Ivy League education there. And you get a 4-year degree. And when you leave there, you got a guaranteed job for 5 years in the Army. So not even the counselors or teachers really understood the significance of doing something like that. And so again, the lack of understanding, lack of information, especially in Wyoming with our low density of 500,000 people, you get very few, 3 a year going to a given academy. So that was fun, but getting there, plebe year, you hear Beast Barracks is the first summer there, and it's basically basic training as 17, 18-year-olds
Oh,
going
wow.
in, and you got people from every state, different countries going through as your classmates, and you start with about 1,400, and we graduated with, I think, 1,017. So the
Wow.
attrition rate is pretty high, and a lot of will be that first year. People will find they don't want to be there, or they're there for the wrong reason. You'll find that some people get hurt. Some people fail academically once academic classes start and things. It's difficult. And also, some people will just take a look at it and figure that it's not really what they want to do as a career.
Yeah.
So not only at 18 did you have to think about your 4 years of school, but you had to also think about your 5 years of mandatory service after that. So at 18, you're making a decision that's going to take you through your 20s. It got easier every year. You got more and more time off and different things, but struggles there. I'll tell you one, swimming. I grew up in Wyoming. I went to swimming lessons in second grade at the city park.
Right.
And failed miserably. My brother and I were getting yelled at by a guy with a mustache and a patch on his eye that told us quit wiping our faces. And I never went back. That's second grade. And so my senior year, I'm asking all my swim team buddies that I grew up with, hey, you got to teach me how to swim. And when I got to West Point, they test you immediately, and they categorize you in different groups as far as your capabilities. And the lowest section, whether it was math, swimming, boxing, whatever, was called rock. So you're in the rock section. The swimming, it made sense because everybody in there couldn't swim. And so we started going to PE by holding the sides of the pool in waist deep water, blowing bubbles. These huge football players, all these guys, 18 years old, blowing bubbles, learning how to swim.
Gotta start from the basics. Yeah.
And I had to take thermofluid dynamics twice. One was during the summer, but swimming was the hardest thing I had to do. So I learned a lot those 4 years. They really teach you leadership. They teach you ethic, character building, that type of thing. And you leave there with a firm understanding of the field that you're going to go into in the Army. And people are going to leave because you wear uniforms every day.
Yeah.
You eat in the mess hall, you march. We had parades. Everybody's an athlete there. 1/4 of a class and 1/4 of the Corps of Cadets. So 4,000 total at West Point. 1,000 are NCAA intercollegiate Division I athletes.
Wow.
So everybody there was starting whatever sport, all state, all American. And they had over 30 varsity sports going on. And then if you didn't make the varsity sports, they had club sports. And then they also had intramurals. And one of the most dangerous sports, it was rated in magazines that the United States was tackle football at West Point for intramurals, not flag, tackle. Practice about 2 weeks. Everybody's suited up, and these are guys that have played starting, all over the state and all over the country. And we were hitting hard. In fact, the coach for Army would come down to watch intramurals. And he actually brought up a fullback who ended up starting on the Army varsity team playing Division I football.
Wow.
So anyway, it was great. I made great friends. Like I said, the 3 guys that I went, 3 of us from Wyoming, all became friends, and a couple came to my wedding. So we'll get back to your original question here.
Yes. Well, no, so I'm really glad you didn't start there now.
My parents came out twice, once during my freshman plebe year and then at graduation, because they had traveled from Wyoming to New York. And so I spent a lot of time, a lot of holidays at friends' house that lived in New York and, other cadets there. And you got to be very close with those guys that, they say cooperate and graduate. And it truly is your class working together throughout those 4 years to get where you're at. And you stay very close to those guys. We had 30 days of vacation before I had to report for my initial officer training down at Fort Benning, Georgia. And so I drove home to Wyoming and started hanging out, stayed at my mom's house, and ended up in the Holiday Inn bar at Philly's one night and started dancing with one girl. And I asked my brother, who is that? And he goes, that's Heather Dale. He graduated with her. I said, oh, well, 2 weeks later, we were engaged.
You were like, this girl, she's the one.
This girl. And so we got engaged. I think we went to Rapid City for car speakers and came out with a ring from Zales. and I took off that same month I got engaged. I took off for 6 months of training down in
Mm-hmm.
Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually went through officer basic training there with a bunch of other lieutenants. I'd already gone to airborne school and jumped out airplanes as a junior at West Point. And then I was going through Ranger School, also U.S. Army Ranger School, which is 48 days of fun in the desert, swamps, mountains.
Did you say
No,
fun?
yeah, no
Yeah.
sleep, doing ambushes, raids, all that kind of thing.
That
No
sounds
food,
like
no sleep
fun.
in the
Yep.
winter. Yeah. And
In the
cold and
winter.
wet. So, I sent my wedding guest list to my wife. I think she crossed off all my girlfriends. And, and then, I was in the middle of Ranger School in the Mount Phase winter. I got on a plane and flew home in December.
Mm-hmm.
They gave us kind of a Christmas exodus. Everybody got to go home for a week or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
In the middle of this tough school, and a lot of people didn't come back because once you're home, you're like, I'm not going back there. Screw this.
Sure. Yeah.
But I flew home to get married in the middle of that school, and everybody like, you did what? You got married? So I got off the plane, skinny, no hair, kind of a green tint to me, tired,
Mm-hmm.
hungry, and Heather said, that's not what I got engaged to, but
She's like,
so
who are you?
we had our wedding, cold night here in Gillette, like 20 degrees and snowing.
Did you just
And
do it at the airport? It sounds like you just got off
no,
the air. Yeah.
no, yeah, it could have. It was that quick because within that same week, I
Yeah.
left again for 3 more months.
Wow.
So she stayed in Gillette, and had a 1.5-year-old son.
Hmm.
And so I became a dad and a husband the same day. And then I finished Ranger School in February of 1988. And then I drove from Georgia to Wyoming and picked up my new wife and our son and drove to Fort Lewis, Washington by Tacoma.
Hmm.
And spent 4 years there, doing all my lieutenant time as a brand new 22-year-old leader. Had 30 soldiers and got to put out forest fires in Montana as part of missions, and did a lot of training
Wow.
at the training center in California, in different places. But that's really the formation of your leadership during those first 4 years. We're actually in charge of people.
Mm-hmm.
And to give you an idea, for a platoon of about 30 people, I had everyone from 18 years old up to like 50.
Okay.
And, I'm a 22-year-old counseling people in their marriage. And I just got married,
Right.
talking to them, it's like, okay, it's baptism by fire.
Right.
But from there, we moved down, and we had another son there, Scotty. And from there, we moved down to Georgia. And that was for my training as a newly promoted captain at that point.
Mm-hmm.
You go through your captain's course there. And then I stayed and taught lieutenants at the basic course there for 2 years, which was great. Had 30 new lieutenants, 22-year-olds coming out of college in West Point and Officer Candidate School, and have them out in the field and out in the classroom, just teaching them our field craft. And then I stayed after that and had a company command, mechanized company, and ended up taking that unit to Kuwait when this is after Desert Storm, when Saddam started bringing stuff back to the border and threatening. We launched out, drew our equipment off of ships that were floating out there with equipment. We were the first ones to draw it off.
Wow.
And rushed to the border, load up live ammunition, and he ended up turning around. So that was a month, and when he came back. So that was my big deployment during that time. And, a company's about 100 people, so that was an opportunity to run that organization.
Wow.
And then from there, we went to California, to Fort Irwin in the middle of Mojave Desert, 130 degrees in the summer. Death Valley's right next to it.
That sounds horrible.
And trained units for 2 years there as an observer controller, and got to live in the desert and drive around for 14 days and come back in, see the wife and kids for a few days, load the cooler back up and head back out. But
just like
great rewarding time.
I like to hear that you say you got to live in the desert. That's positive thinking, Denton.
If you've ever been to Barstow, California, on the way to Vegas or LA,
yeah.
It's due north of Barstow in the middle of the desert, about 30 miles.
Wow.
Beautiful mountains around it, but it is desert. And they say, bring your spouse there at night so they can't see what you're driving them to until they wake up in the morning and see beautiful Teafort Mountain there.
Okay. All right. Okay. So there's a positive there.
Yeah. But from there, I got told you've been 11 years now and you've not served overseas yet. So we're going to send you to Saudi Arabia for a year, but your family can't come. And it is now March and you're going to report in June. So,
It's time to
I wasn't going to leave.
process that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were gonna kick us off the military installation because of housing, and I was leaving, on an assignment. So I would have had to move family to Barstow, California, which I was not going to do.
Mhm.
And so we had the opportunity to move them back to Gillette.
Okay.
So my wife came back, lived with her parents in Gillette, and our two kids were able to go to our old elementary and junior high for a year and see both sets of grandparents. So that was good.
That's
Spent a year in Saudi Arabia training the Saudis on the equipment we sold them, the M1 tanks and the M2 Bradley fighting vehicles that after Desert Storm, they purchased a whole bunch of that and came with a State Department package of us going over to teach them how to use the equipment. And, I had a great opportunity to make some more friends there internationally because there's people from all over the world there working at the hospitals and military training and things. And I got a chance to visit a lot of countries too from there.
Yeah.
And I also learned, weak swimmer that I was, to scuba dive.
Okay.
And I was in the Red Sea every weekend, 7 dives a weekend. I had over 100 dives before I left. So I went from weak swimming to master scuba diving.
I was going to say, you went from blowing bubbles to mastering the art.
I mean, it was free. First of all, they had all the equipment for us. We had our own air compressor, so it was free.
Yeah.
And we were camping right on the beach. So at the night, you dive, grab lobsters, bring them up, steam them right on the beach, eat lobster while you're sitting there looking at dolphins, and
Man.
It was just an incredible experience that year in Saudi Arabia, and a chance to get to kind of know the Middle East culture for a year of immersion there. From there, I came back to U.S. as a major, and we went to Fort Stewart, Georgia, over by Savannah.
Okay.
And we're there for 7 consecutive years. And during those years, kids started in elementary and junior high, and by the time we left, one had graduated already, and one was a senior.
Okay.
So we went from like little Tykes toys in the yard to like them driving our cars.
To
let you know how long we were there.
For sure. Yeah.
And for a military family, it's rare because you usually move every three years or so. We were there 7 consecutive years.
Okay.
But during that time, I deployed twice to Iraq. Once during the first invasion in 2002 and 3. We went in April 2003 into Baghdad, and I was with the lead unit there. And then spent a year there, and then went home for a year, and then came back for another year during the voting process in Iraq when they're electing their first leadership for their legislature, really. So those 2 years was the first time I'd been shot at. It's the first time you shot somebody else. First time I had friendly fire going through my vehicle, depleted uranium rounds.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was the first time I saw people dead. All kinds of body and burns and gunshot wounds and explosions and other things. And going through that, in the old days, they talked about seeing the elephant, combat, seeing the elephant. And for that first time, that first fight on April 7th, going into Baghdad in 2003, I was praying to myself just get me through this, God. Got to get back to my family. Just get me through this, protect my guys. And, that's the first time I had a loss in an organization. We had 2 people die, including we had Staff Sergeant Stever, who's a mechanic, and then we had Sergeant Marshall, who's our scout platoon sergeant, both killed by RPGs, rocket propelled grenades. And then we had David Bloom from NBC that was attached to us as our embedded reporter. And he died from deep vein thrombosis the day before us entering Baghdad.
Really?
And his camera crew stayed with us and continued to do the live feed. So this whole time fighting, my wife's watching our fight on NBC and Fox because they were broadcasting live from the fight.
Wow.
So it took from the time from the time we crossed the border, it took 21 days to get to Baghdad, fighting along the way. And I hadn't showered in 21 days.
I don't think anybody cared over there.
Well, we were wearing our chemical suits, which kept the smell in. The charcoal.
So you cared,
we'd have baby wipes and be able to wipe down a little bit and things, and cold bottle water. You had a little shampoo, whatever, but had not truly showered since then. And as we rolled into Baghdad on the outskirts, we had a mission brief that night, and I was thinking to myself, we have a brigade of about 5,000 people because we're the front end of it. And I thought, we're going to a city of 5 million people, and we don't know a lot about what's in there right now.
Yeah.
And so just thinking about, rolling down these streets of 5 million people, what's going to happen?
Right.
And fortunately, we didn't have a lot of great losses. They call it Thunder Run because we did literally with 2 tank battalions and a mechanized infantry brigade roll through Baghdad once. Every vehicle got hit, and the airport was secured at that point. And then we rolled through again with intent of coming out. But we actually stayed in downtown Baghdad. We said we got it.
Wow.
And from that point, I stayed. That was in April, and I stayed through August in Baghdad, monitoring all the changes that happened and what we had to do there to secure the population in that country. And then went on to Fallujah for about a month before I came home. So that was a full year. And that year, we didn't have phones, we didn't have internet, no Zoom, no FaceTime, none of that. And so you were truly waiting letters for 2 to 3 weeks. We just sent a letter and got a letter back. And eventually we had some email set up, and the NBC guys had one of our vehicles rigged with all their transmission stuff. So they would let us call home sometimes from their cell phones and sat phones. But that was my first combat. That was my first time. I was a major battalion executive officer, and we fought in and we took Baghdad.
Wow.
And so
that's incredible.
It was incredible because now there's books and everything that I'm in, another, about the whole thing. And I was like,
we did that. To a celebrity.
I said, we said we did that.
That's amazing, Denton.
And then, had a great welcome home. Wife and kids were there and kind of reintegrated back into the neighborhood just to turn around and leave again a year later.
My goodness.
And that full year was, the trouble at that time was then you started seeing some insurgency of former Ba'ath Party members, former soldiers under Saddam Hussein, former, police, other people that really got unemployed when we went in there because they lost their jobs.
Right.
And so they were being paid to kill Americans.
Wow.
And so we started to have the improvised explosive devices, the IEDs, that are the big explosions that were blowing vehicles in half and blowing turrets off and really killing everybody in the vehicles. And we ended up having a lot of deaths that year. Just in our brigade, we had over 50. And I had to take over a battalion, which was probably close to about 600 people at the time. And I lost 18 in my battalion. And we were doing a memorial service almost every week. And that made it tough. You started seeing very, very serious wounds and burns and that time, limbs. Yeah. And it was just a really tough time to be there, along with helping the Iraqis establish their government and have their first elections and supervising the polls and voting and all that. Actually had Geraldo Rivera ride with me in my back seat for 4 days.
Wow.
As we were going around. And that was an interesting experience.
I bet.
And, it was just a different year to be there, and then came back. I went to the training brigade at Fort Stewart to help train our Guard and Reserve that were deploying also. Did that for a year, then was promoted to lieutenant colonel and went on to go again. That was the second Iraq trip. Wow. And then, I got 2 years mixed up there, but that was the second Iraq trip when I went back as a lieutenant colonel and ended up taking over a unit. The commander, Bill Wood, was blown up, and I had to take his place the next day. And it was a National Guard battalion from California that was attached to 3rd Infantry Division, an active unit. So that was a unique experience commanding California Guardsmen for that time period in combat. So it was very unique.
Denton?
After that year, I came back, and at that point, we'd spent 7 years at Fort Stewart, Georgia.
That is,
and the Army said, "Time to move out, Naps. You need to leave."
Yeah.
So I went and took command of a basic training battalion at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, just south of St. Louis, for 2 years, and that was receiving thousands of new recruits from age 17 on up to 42. Is when it being for enlistment, which is wild. For 2 years, having them 9 weeks at a time to train them up to go from civilian to soldier, and then push them out to units. So that was rewarding experience, just being able to take a young kid, in some cases not so young, 42,
Yeah.
putting them through 9 weeks of intensive training, and then watching them ship off in uniform, a different person.
Mm.
And that was very rewarding. It was tough. It was 7 days a week, getting calls at 2 a.m. After coming out of Iraq, but we did that for 2 years hard. Got to live in Missouri for the first time and make new friends and see things around there. And that was quite the experience there. Unfortunately, 30 days after I took command there, we lost our son, Brandon. Brandon, bright young man, had dyslexia growing up, and he was this 1.5-year-old son that I eventually adopted, and he's my son. But he decided when we moved from Georgia to Missouri that he wanted to stay there. He had a girlfriend of 3 years at the time, beautiful girl, Miss Georgia pageant girl, and he was going to college at night and working during the day, and said, "I want to stay here. All my friends are here. They lived there 7 years, graduated high school there. All my friends are here. I got a job. I'll be okay." So we helped find him an apartment. He got one of his high school roommates or classmates and moved in. I handed him my pickup keys, and we left. And 30 days later, we were in Missouri and got the word that he'd shot himself. That night was hard. We wanted to drive down there and got told, no, wait till morning. There's nothing you guys can do. But driving back down to Georgia was hard. And then getting there and having to, make all the arrangements for your son. You never expect to bury your child,
No kidding.
And so that whole process, and just seeing my wife just collapse and unable to eat and unable to sleep. And my youngest son, Scott, was 18 at the time, devastated. I was his older brother. They played soccer together 3 years apart, completely devastated. And, tough thing about suicide is you don't know why.
Right.
And we knew that he got in a fight with his girlfriend. He was drunk with his buddies and, took his life. And, a lot of people that we talked to talked about the state of mind that you're in. To hurt yourself or take your own life is you're not in a sane state of mind.
Right.
At that time. And nobody knows the depression or the hurt or the hopelessness that somebody has to do that. And Brandon was a happy kid, always joking, funny. He had trouble in school because of dyslexia, and that embarrassed him sometimes, but just a stud soccer player. I mean, really good. Probably could have played in college. But, he ended it that night, and there was no sign to us of any depression. Never saw any signals, and you always ask yourself, what did I miss?
Yeah.
What didn't we see? And suicides are all different. And this one, we never saw it coming. And for that reason, all kinds of things go through your head, and the thing you can't do is ask what happened, what if,
right,
why? Because you don't have an answer.
Right.
And so that was really tough going into that command, because I was commanding people that were Brandon's age.
No kidding. Oh my
And had
God.
a lot coming in saying they couldn't take it and they attempted suicide. We had one kid try to hang himself with a belt in the bathroom, and others that ate a whole tube of toothpaste, and I'm like, yeah, you're not going home for that, but just dealing with that after having just gone through that myself, plus watching my wife help those young people after having just lost her son. And our son was in high school. Scott was brand new high school, senior year, didn't know anybody, and joined the soccer team and, went on with life. And I look back and I think that we probably could have helped him more with counseling and other things that, he just drove on and did what he needed to do.
Yeah.
That group of friends that he had that year are still very close to him because they took him in, understood the situation. And Heather and I went to some counseling. A lot of people are saying suicide is selfish. That's the easy way out. It's selfish. And people didn't know what to say to you, because of the stigma of suicide.
Right.
And so at his wake, people were coming through and just didn't really know what to say.
Mm-hmm.
And one lady came through to my wife and she goes, well, shit happens. And I thought my wife was going to throat punch her.
I was gonna say I
Um,
would have throat
and
punched her.
and I said, people don't know what to say. It's okay, you
Mm,
know. And sometimes it's best not to say anything. Just be there, and hug them, and just be there.
mm.
But for me, a lot of his high school friends came through, and I didn't know who they were
Yeah.
because I'd been deployed during their high school years.
Right. Right.
And my wife's like, that's what I said. I don't know who that is. And I look back on myself, and could I have made a difference by being there for the kids during those years
Mm-hmm.
or not? And again, you can't guess. And you think about that, and you got some people that say, well, I wouldn't be in the military because it's hard on the kids.
Yeah.
But I tell you, military kids, brats, are some of the most resilient, toughest, easy adjusting, easy to get along with people you ever know, because they do have to make new friends. They do move every 3 years. They do have to adjust to environments. But looking back, there's a lot of care for veterans
Mm-hmm.
and active duty for mental health,
Mm-hmm.
and high priorities put on that. But for the spouses and kids, not so much. And we just expect our kids to up and move and to just get along, fit in, make new friends, start your school, join the sports, make the
Yeah.
team, and then we're going to move again in 3 years.
Yep.
And so I think it's important that we take a look at families, and I've expressed that up at the national level that we need to look at family programs for service members, because oftentimes they're the ones that suffer the most, not knowing what we're doing. I'm fine, I know what I'm doing, but
Denton,
they're at home
if I
worrying and
was
waiting
right, if
and
I
running
was
the
your wife
household. Yeah.
watching you on national television fighting over there, I would be a mess.
Well, it was bad because she didn't sleep.
I can only
She's watching
imagine.
this. So, people say, turn the TV off, go outside,
Yeah.
do something totally different, and don't sit there and just watch the war and
Right.
wonder, and worry. So that was a unique situation with everything on TV live,
Yeah.
as we went in Iraq.
Right. Oh my gosh. And
So yeah, losing my son, did the basic training. And from there, the first time I ever asked the Army for anything,
mm,
it got time for my next assignment to leave. And I said, hey, look, I said, my youngest son is a freshman down at University of Central Florida in Orlando. And I said, we just lost our oldest son. And I said, we need to be down by him. What do you got in Florida? And I said, preferably, I'd like to go to, Central Command or Special Operations Command down there in Tampa.
yeah.
And they said, well, we happen to have a Lieutenant Colonel slot in Tampa at Special Operations Command, and it's yours. So we picked up and moved to Florida. And for the next 3 years, we got to be next to our son, Scott, just an hour away in Orlando.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of tailgating, a lot of concerts, a lot of visits, and, a lot of grieving and growing of our family during those 3 years down in Tampa.
Right.
And worked for a great organization, fighting worldwide terrorism and knowing the insides and outs, what's going on. And actually the futures part, we're determining what special operations need to look like for the next 30 years to be able to combat terrorism and other problems within the world. So great place to work. I did make colonel while I was there. So about 1 in every 100 lieutenants make colonel.
That's amazing.
So I did make that, and I got accepted to the U.S. Army War College in Pennsylvania. So we went from Tampa after about 4 years there up to Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And, they say it's the best year of life. It's U.S. Army War College. You have a seminar of about 16 people from every service and Guard, Active Reserve. And then we also had interagency people, so FBI, Border Patrol, one of those guys in your seminar. And then we had 3 internationals in your seminar.
Yeah.
And so for a year, you go to school in the morning and then drink beer in the afternoon and evenings and go on trips. And you really got close in a year's time with your 300 and some classmates, but 73 of those guys were international. And so we're still very close, keeping in touch on LinkedIn and Facebook and other things of that time. But I knew from there, I had to go to Afghanistan for a year. They said, it's been a while since you deployed. The last time was 2006 to Iraq. It's now 2011. And so 2012, you're going to Afghanistan for a year. So Heather stayed at Carlisle, Pennsylvania. A few of their wives, about 12, also had husbands deploying or wives in some cases deploying over to Afghanistan. When I got there, it's a unique situation because usually I was used to deploying with a unit that you trained with and lived with. And this time I was an individual replacement as a commander.
Oh,
Everybody
really?
in the unit was an individual placement. There was every service to include the Coast Guard and 9 different nations because
Wow.
it fell under NATO. So I had Czechs, Poles, Koreans, uh, Mongolians, French, Canadians, just all kinds of people. I worked for a Canadian. I worked for an Australian while I was there.
Wow. Wow.
And so that year, Afghan, very different from Iraq, but we're in the process of downsizing. So I had 20 different training areas from the whole eastern side of Pakistan and Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to reduce that down to 4 in a year. We were training Afghan army and policemen. And this was a time where you had, they called it insider threats, where the same people we're training would just turn around and shoot you.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And not knowing who was friendly and who wasn't, you always
Yeah.
had to be ready, always had to be secure and coordinate with these guys to downsize and to get them to take over the mission that we had been doing.
Mm-hmm.
And pushing fuel and supply and logistics and vehicles and all that kind of thing to them. So I did that for a full year. That was up to 2013. And at that point, I came home. Only lost 2 guys during that time. 2 Romanian National Guardsmen that were my personal security attachment were blown up.
Mm.
And came back home. And I knew that was my last deployment. I had 4 years left to hit 30 years in the Army.
Yeah. Jeez.
And I was having fun. Some years are better than others, but I loved what I was doing. I loved the soldiers and their families and leading, and it was what we wanted to do. And after we lost our son, the Army community came together, just full force, housed us, fed us, took care of us, agreed with us. And I said, there's no place would rather be to be cared for like this. I said, this is where we belong. And so from there, we went to where I started, West Point, New York. It was my very last assignment. And we went for 4 years. For 2 years, I got to run the Center for Army Profession Ethic, travel around the Army and talk about what we believe and why we believe it as a profession.
Okay.
And produce that doctrine. And so I got to talk to Guard units, Reserve units, active all over the U.S. and some overseas. And then the last 2 years, we have a training doctor come in at the Army level that works on capability gaps and new ideas and solutions. I got to do that for 2 years. But the biggest thing, I started there when I was 18. And then what was I then? 48, 49. We had cadets at our house all the time.
Okay.
We sponsored them. So they have opportunity to come over and eat with you, to visit with you, tailgate before football games and different things. And really learn what's like to be an Army family, from an Army family. And plus gets them away from the barracks and, the upperclassmen, and they get to come relax for a little bit.
Yeah.
And that was very beneficial because we were really mentoring the next generation of officers.
That's special.
And, my wife was a huge part of that. And it was very worthwhile and very, coming full circle. And the retrospective, I was here when I was 18. Now I'm helping these 18-year-olds for my last assignment. Was very meaningful. Retired in 2017. No fanfare. Went and got my flag. I mean, I didn't even have a ceremony. And my wife and I picked up and we said, okay, what do we want to do? We put everything in storage. We moved out of our house in October, and this was March.
Okay.
We had everything stored. We moved into somebody's garage in Highland Falls, New York. Moved out of our 5-bedroom, historic military quarters, put everything in storage, and moved into a garage. We put a queen bed in there, which took up almost the whole place. And I said, everything we take with us is either going to be sold, thrown away, or go to California when we go.
Yeah.
So we decided California because that's where our son was, Scotty.
Okay.
With his wife and 2 grandchildren.
Okay. Yep.
So they were there, and we said, well, everything's in storage. We're homeless now. And let's go out there and stay with them a little while, stay out there. So we drove out there, 2 cars and whatever we could carry, and got there and got a small apartment in Irvine, California. And I went through the process of looking for a job. And this gets to the transition piece. Getting out of service is interesting, especially after you've been in it for 30 years plus 4.
Can only imagine.
Of you're leaving everything you've known since you were 18.
Yeah.
And that happens every day. We have thousands of soldiers leaving the service every day.
Mm-hmm.
And they've got to find what they want to do. Some have served 4 years and others have served 30 or longer for some of the general officers and things. So I started looking for a job. Now I came out as a colonel, 30 years experience, leading all kinds of units to include internationally, deploying thousands and thousands of people, doing most of it under fire.
Yeah.
And I had 2 master's degrees. I could not find a job in Orange County, California for 8 months. And I was trying hard.
Right.
One of the things that the Army, all the service really, before you leave the service now, there's something called TAPS. It's a transition assistance program, TAP course. And anywhere from 2 years to the time you think you're going to get out, you can sign up for it and start the process. But it's really one formal week of briefings and activities, training to have you leave the service.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking, okay, it took 4 years of school to get me into the service. Now I'm getting a week to get out.
Right.
And, I think I can do it very easily because my assignment, it was just me.
Yeah.
There. And first time I wasn't responsible for anybody else but me. And I went 3 times because I could,
Mm-hmm.
3 different weeks. But thinking about the privates out in the units and it's up to the commanders if, hey, we're willing to let you go for a week and you're going to miss these things because you're getting out.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times that didn't happen. Most of the time commanders do the right thing, but sometimes guys were right up the rope of they had to go through that class mandatory before they could leave. And it's the last thing they had to do. So how often did they listen very closely to what was going on when they're worried about moving their family and everything, starting a new life?
Right.
But the first 2 days were to go over really Department of Labor and other people coming in talking about, here's how you write a resume.
Mm-hmm.
Here's how you interview. Here's your 30-second elevator speech. Here's what to wear. Here's some organizations that you may check into when you're looking for a job. And the other couple of days was somebody, and not necessarily a certified VA person, but somebody coming and talking about your benefits,
Mm-hmm.
health, VA benefits, disability benefits, and basically telling you, hey, when you get there, go check in, start your VA process and everything like that. So a lot of people don't remember that. It was fast and furious. And when they get to their place where they're going to live, sometimes it may be their hometown, sometimes not.
Mm-hmm.
Of actually showing up somewhere for the first time, some with family, and figuring out where am I going to live, where am I going to work, how's this whole thing operate out here?
Right.
And so I saw what was missing was basically a catcher's mitt. The Department of Defense is throwing the pitch out
Mm-hmm.
and you're ending up somewhere, but there's no catcher to receive you and say, I got you.
Sure.
And here's some veteran organizations you can join. And here's how you process claims. Here's the VA. Here's a great place for kids to go to school. Here's a realtor that, gets you a great house. Here's a church we go to. There's nobody to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And even when you go back to your hometown, like I did, I'd been gone 34 years.
I was going to say, you're
I came back
basically
for
a stranger.
Christmas and, summers, but I came back for 34 years and it was interesting. I said my great-grandfather homestead in 1901. My grandfather's postmaster here. My dad had bands playing here in Sheridan, Buffalo, brought us. But I get back here and running for Congress and people are like, you ain't from here. You're from California. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
I said, how long you been here? 4 years? I said, I guess you're not from here.
Right.
When I mean, my first grade teacher actually came to one of my campaign events. Sally Sheehan, my first grade teacher's there.
Wait,
I'm like,
Sheehan?
Yeah.
I had a
Sally
Sheehan.
Sheehan.
Shelly
Yeah.
Sheehan? She
Sally.
me.
Yeah?
Yeah. That's
How about
crazy.
That? She came to my campaign in 2021 in the city park.
Gosh.
And so, when people, you aren't from here, I said, talk to my first grade teacher. Ask where I'm from.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm a Wyomingite. Just because I was in the Army 30 years and, I carried a Wyoming driver's license, voted absentee in Wyoming. So There you go.
That's amazing.
But coming back home, things change.
Yeah.
Some things don't, but things change. And even trying to find, I'd lived in Tampa, I'd lived in New York, I'd lived in, Los Angeles area, Orange County, close to St. Louis. You had major medical facilities. You had, at that time, active duty facilities I could use. And now I'm coming back. So I'm like, okay, our VA clinic. It's way outside on the south part of town. What I found is People either go to Fort Meade or to Sheridan for VA care because those are two hospitals.
Mm-hmm.
We really fall under Sheridan VA Hospital. But just seeing the lack of trust of Veterans Affairs that was out there. And especially our Vietnam veterans, which we have a large population of, never having used VA before. Because when they came home out of the service, they were, didn't want to wear their uniforms. They didn't want anybody to know they were in the military coming out of Vietnam.
Sure.
And that was just the culture then, the society and what it thought about the war.
Mm-hmm.
And it trickled down, unfortunately, to those who had to fight it.
Yeah.
And because of that, a lot of those guys just drifted into society. And some were very successful, some not. Some had a lot of mental health issues. Some were just fine. But the big thing was they weren't welcomed home. And they didn't get the care they needed through the Department of Defense or the VA. And because of that, they did something that was incredible. Every time I flew back from Iraq or Afghanistan, 2 a.m. at the airport, Sunday night, whatever, the people that were there to welcome us home, any airport, were our Vietnam veterans in their jackets, and everything.
I'm going to cry all over again.
Yeah. Well, we did too, because they didn't get that, but they made sure we got it.
Oh my gosh.
And that says something about the character, of those guys after what they went through, but they knew we needed it. And in fact, when Afghanistan fell, really, after we drastically pulled out of there and the Taliban took over, a lot of the Vietnam veterans likened it to the fall of Saigon. And everybody rushing out there, and they knew how that affected them.
Yeah.
After years of fighting Vietnam. And now here's our generation, the longest war in history in the United States, war on terrorism for 20 years plus. We just had, our breath knocked out of us.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the Vietnam guys are saying, hey, you okay? Do you want to talk about Afghanistan? We understand, And so that camaraderie that extended over generations was still there. And our World War II vets, God bless them. And we got Bryce Rumpf in Gillette here that comes to all the veterans breakfast. He's 98.
Whoa.
He fought in World War II, a lot of the Rough Islands, Korea, and I think he was part of Vietnam actually also. But he's still walking and talking and playing harmonica, and he's a great guy. And all those World War II guys, like you said, are sharp. They're sharp as a tack.
They really are.
And just, we got World War II veterans. We got the forgotten war, the Korean veterans. Everybody always forgets about Korea. It's always about World War II and Vietnam. Well, there's something between there. Yeah. And it was a hard fight in cold weather in Korea.
Yeah.
Those guys are still around. And our 70 and 80-year-olds now are Vietnam veterans. And then you go into the next generation of, the war on communism, really, and then, the Cold War, and then Desert Storm, and then into our anti-terrorism fights in Afghanistan, Iraq, and other places, Djibouti, Africa, different places.
Yeah.
So, a unique situation, having served 30 years active, but then being able to come back and say, okay, what do veterans need? And looking at the programs and the care and the fact that nobody's there to receive you. So there's a big disconnect between leaving the service and entering society, and nobody really to catch you. Sure. And so that's something the service has been working on, almost trying to find like a sponsorship before you leave active duty to say, okay, you're going to Gillette, Wyoming. Here's a number for the American Legion, the VFW, and VA. Recommend you call them before you leave here, make those connections. They can tell you about the community, where you're moving to, and try to get that sponsorship thing type going. Right now, it's a volunteer program that people can sign up. Yeah, I'll do that. I'm in Gillette. I'll take any veterans that come into Wyoming.
Sure.
But it's not mandatory. And so I said, our first job is to find veterans. And what I mean by that is, I said we have 11% veterans in Wyoming. Well, where are they? Well, you can extrapolate and say, okay, Cheyenne, Casper, Gillette, Sherry, some of the bigger populations, Rock Springs. That's probably where most of them are at. But where are they?
Right.
I said, you can see some because some will be at the Legion or the VFW, Veteran Foreign Wars, or other organizations, or they may have, a hat on. They may be wearing, their combat infantry badge. They may speak differently. They may still keep their hair like I do. And you'll say, okay, yeah, looks military, probably military.
Yeah.
Some you don't know.
Right.
And I said, you'll be working next door to somebody in the cubicle next to you for 10 years and never knew they served because you didn't ask.
Mm-hmm.
Because we won't tell you. Most veterans won't self-identify. Like I said, we're a humble profession. We get told, move, find a job, find a house, fit in. And nobody cares what you did before. You got to start fresh.
Yeah. That's horrible.
And that's hard. It is hard.
So many emotions, Denton.
It's a full life.
Oh my gosh.
Been around,
You have done incredible things. And it's true. Like, we do not thank our service members enough. And it is like, so many emotions. Been holding it together so well. I'm blown away. And I am so grateful. And it's incredible that you went through all that you did and you're still wanting to serve your country, and you're making it happen. You're not taking no for an answer and you're doing it. And it's just like, I know whenever you and I had talked originally, whenever you got to the point of just like not knowing who might be a veteran or whatnot, but like people don't ask anymore and people don't have those conversations. And the thing of the matter is if we did ask them saying, hey, like, what's your story? And then if they were like, oh, I served here, did this, did that, then it's like, are you taking care of yourself? Are you taking care of your family? Are you actually utilizing the benefits that you guys get, and being able to make sure that people have a connection like you in order to make it happen, because they may not have any idea of how to even reach out or who to even reach out to.
And that's the major case is what we find, first, here's my big ask. We'll get this again at the end, but I'm saying find our veterans. And I'm not saying veterans go find veterans. I'm saying everybody go find veterans.
Yeah.
Because there's only 11% of us. Go find them. The way you find them is ask everybody. Because you never know. Hair may be down to here, full beard, gorgeous most lady you've ever seen sitting there, professionals, tradesmen, all kinds of people, teachers, other people that you work with, just ask. When you're sitting next to somebody. And what we asked, I stopped asking, are you a veteran? Because a lot of people say, well, not really, because I didn't deploy, or, I was just in the reserves, or, I got thrown out or whatever. You're still a veteran. Now, there's several definitions of veterans. VA has their own, and you've had to have other than, you couldn't have a bad conduct discharge and get VA benefits. It's just one of their rules at the federal level. But I say those are probably the people that need help the most because they can't get anything.
Right.
So how else can we help them besides VA? We've had organizations that do discharge upgrades to take that bad conduct discharge to an honorable. I've got one guy that's 65 now, got tossed out of the Navy when he was 18 because he smoked weed. And now he can't get any benefits.
Yeah.
So, what do you do with those guys? So it's case by case basis. Some guys, have personality dispute with their commander and get thrown out. But people change, times change, and they did raise their hand and serve at one point. So I didn't ask, are you veterans? I said, did you serve in the military?
There you go.
And if they say no, you say, well, you look like you could have, so what do you do? But other people say, yeah, I did. And I said, well, what'd you do in the service? What branch? And what you've been doing since then. You got family? You need anything? No, I don't need anything. No, really, what could you use? Healthcare okay? I'm fine. No, really, what do you need? And that persistence and that seeking more information is important. So I'm telling everybody, just ask. It's 11% of us out there, 8 nationally, but Wyoming, there's 11% of us out there that served. And to give you an idea of how many we've identified, when I came back to Gillette a year and a half ago, or 2 years ago, really, we started this process we formed a council. It's the Campbell County Veterans Council. And what it is taking all the current veteran organizations, like two American Legions, our VFW, the Marine Corps League, the Civil Air Patrol, VA, bring them together once a month to synchronize. So we're able to share resources, we're able to share information and ensure that we have a continuity of care and warm handoffs for organizations that are helping particular veterans, whether it's from the shelter to mental health hospital to a job or a place to live, trying to get all that going together. But in the process of that, we formed these cards that we're putting out all over that are basically front, back, telling about your service.
Yeah.
And we collect those up, and we've got a stack of about 300 now that we put in our database. So at 11%, Gillette population, look at kids and adults, or some being not service. 1 in 10 people could be a veteran. And so we've collected 300 names for Gillette, Campbell County, and there's probably 3,400 veterans.
Right. Yeah.
So we've got a ways to go.
There's a lot more out there. We got to find them.
We got to find them. And then the other part is getting services for them. So I talk about everybody finding them.
Yes.
Because it's going to have to be that effort to get this fixed and get people taken care of. So the other part is the resources part. You've got a lot of organizations that are veterans helping veterans, a lot of them. And there's a lot of grants and things out there for those organizations to help with. But what we're missing is the other 92% of the population.
Yeah.
Which is our civilians that provide great resources, but there's a lack of understanding, like we talked about, between military and civilians. Unless you've had somebody serve in your family, neighbor or something, all you see is TV and movies.
Yep.
And that doesn't necessarily present veterans in the best light.
Right,
a lot of people synonymous with veterans, you think, well, homelessness, addictions, PTS. And so part of my task, we're going around asking employers, what to do. As far as getting veterans employed and creating that understanding of, you don't have to have special liability insurance because of PTS. In fact, most veterans are doing really well, and they've got, they've got capability to build teams. They've experienced a lot of different diverse environments. They can start at a lower level and come in and quickly rise, and they make your organization better. They make your community better. They come with ethic, character, and that. So,
So through all of this, Denton, the people that we don't know, and the big ask is for all of us, including myself, to ask, right? And make sure that they're being taken care of, because you guys deserve this. Again, my emotions. There was so much to unpack, Denton. How is it that they can connect with you guys and anyone? Is there just an easy way to send, if I was sitting there at a coffee shop with somebody, found out they're a veteran, and they're like, I really don't know who I could even talk to. What is the easiest way for me to remember to sit there and be like, oh, contact so-and-so, or here's a link? What's the best way?
Right. So officially, as part of, I'm going to use Wyoming as an example because we're in Wyoming.
Yeah.
We have a Wyoming Veterans Commission that is a governor appointed position. And within that are regions within Wyoming. And each of those regions has a veteran service officer, a VSO. And for instance, Campbell, Crook, and Weston counties are represented by Sadie McFarland.
Okay.
So she is paid as the veteran service officer. Her office is right with the Department of Family Services and all those other resources. Workforce Wyoming's in there, other things. But that's the official start because that's the person, the VSO is the person that gets your disability started, that has the knowledge of programs and other things you may be eligible for, receives your DD-214, which is a form that shows you were in the service, and then starts that process. The other part is just community organizations, the American Legion, Veteran Foreign Wars, Marine Corps League, that you can go to, and they have advocates there for you. And we've taken care of people's roofs before. We've helped with food and gas cards. We've helped veterans that are passing through Wyoming and their car broke down.
Yeah.
So those organizations are out there, but our part is for the civilian community to understand where those are. So when you do meet a veteran, you know where to send them.
Exactly.
So we started council for that reason, to synchronize these efforts. So we're putting those cards all over the courthouse, the city hall, rec center, library, schools. And we formed these working groups. And these working groups are really for the civilian community to join and help. And one of them is education. We said, do elementary schools know who their military brats are that have had to move every 3 years of their life and may have gone through trauma?
Yeah.
Do teachers know that? Do the churches know? We had the pastoral council of over 20 churches meet once a month here. And I went and talked to them. I said, do you know who your veterans are? If not, why not? Do you have programs for them? Do you need resources from the outside to help you? And for media, we need to help advertising. We need dates in the newspaper for veterans breakfasts, for different briefing events. Chamber of Commerce gave us one of their luncheons to talk about veterans and the different organizations we have. So just seeking those things out, radio stations, newspapers, print, to help us get the message out of who we're looking for and why.
Yeah. And you in particular, you guys are looking to help Wyoming veterans, right?
Yes.
But like you said, there's somewhere for someone all over the nation. And it's just a matter of reaching out wherever you are locally. And then also, I just love that even if they're not Wyoming, like they're passing through, a car breaks down or something, that is incredible that you guys are able to help pick them up and get them off.
Veterans don't have boundaries.
Right?
We go where we want to.
You're all brothers and
sisters. Sometimes it may be your home state, sometimes it may not be, but it may be in transit.
Yeah.
But there's always something there and somebody there to help. And that's what's important. We want to help everybody. But veterans have a special place in my heart. It's not everybody that is willing to raise their hand and go fight for you.
Yeah.
And people need to understand that that's still taking place. And I'll tell you, I want to thank everybody, because for the 20 years I was at war, we still got care packages. We still got cards from kids. We still got welcomed home. And that continues.
Yeah.
And so American society does support our military. It's still looked at as the most honorable profession. And our problem right now is we got to grow the next generation.
Yeah.
We have such a shortage right now in our armed forces. And I think culturally, I had one of my old teachers on the school board ask me, well, why aren't people joining? Because we're in the process of trying to get a junior ROTC started, reserves training our high schools.
That's
Casper
awesome.
got 2, Cheyennes got 2, we got 0. But why aren't people joining? And I said, well, because parents, teachers, clergy, coaches, friends aren't telling them it's the honorable profession, that its service means something, and that it's a great start to life. And if you want to, it's a great retirement, pension, healthcare. It's a profession, and you'll be proud of it when you're done. And there's other things to do afterwards. You're going to get great experience. People don't create that understanding for our youth.
Yeah.
And, I said, veterans, our responsibility first to lead this. You got to go down and talk to 6th grade classes. The museum here started a great program of World War II displays, and they take the 6th graders through there from all the schools. And they've asked us to help out by being there to explain things. They had a kind of a veterans walk through the cemetery to tell the stories of some of the veterans there. We got Civil War and Spanish-American War veterans in our cemetery in Mount Pisgah here.
Wow.
But to tell their story and have family members there telling their story is just an incredible thing. So what you talked about is this living history. We're losing our World War II vets that more than 300 a day, and most of them in their 90s. And we're losing their stories. We're losing their spouses' stories. Our women veterans are in a class of their own, trying to get them taken care of, because they've, they're a minority in the services. And so, there's some special care that they need also, and identification. They come forward less than any of the males and say, I'm a veteran. That just doesn't happen. Yeah. So we're working especially hard at that. But it's finding people to join and getting that started. We are so short right now. To give you an idea, the Army was short 20,000 recruits. We have to, for the United States Army, we had to recruit 10,000 new soldiers every month. That's larger than some countries' armies. That's 10,000 new soldiers a month to maintain our level that we need to be able
Wow.
to defend, fight, and win our nation's wars.
As I'm sitting here and you're talking about the struggles that are happening right now, and like what you're trying to create with like the ROTC program and everything, how can others that are listening, how can they help you help them?
The biggest thing we're looking for, especially locally, is volunteering any services or talents you may have, your time, your kids, your family, if they want to help, but to actually look at what is my passion, what do I have that I have for experience and resources, and what can I provide to these guys?
Yeah.
And then we'll set up the structure to do that. So joining, say, the education working group, we want teachers, we want the Gillette College, we want, anybody that's interested in helping with education, the school board members, for employment and entrepreneurship, business leaders in the community. You got veterans that, don't know how to start their own business.
Mm-hmm.
Or you may have a business that you've done for 30 years and you're ready to close it. Why not sell it to that veteran and mentor them into your successful business already? There's special grants and things, discounts, priorities for veterans that are registered with the state and federal government as a veteran-owned business.
Mm-hmm.
So those types of things, on entrepreneurship, employment, hire veterans. Have a goal, know who your veterans are, have a veteran luncheon once a quarter or whatever, and see what their needs are. Because we are different, and in different, it's a good difference.
Yes.
I mean, most of us have led and understand things. We may have to figure out what's going on for a little bit, but we do it fast.
You'll get it figured out. Yeah.
We'll just make communities and organizations better.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the message I want to get out. So if you've got that in your heart, you particularly want to help those who serve, those who fought for you.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, touch base with local organizations and say, hey, I'd like to volunteer. Most have an auxiliary where you didn't have to be in the service or qualified to be an American Legion, Legionnaire, or in the VFW, but you can be in the auxiliary and help. So there's lots of volunteer opportunities. We had a session down here once a year in Campbell County where somebody comes and does free haircuts for the homeless. And, they hand out socks to them, and just great things to get these people back into society and back where they're living comfortably and are healthy, and safe. And it's amazing. We've got a 36-bed shelter, but it's filled all the time. And you don't see it, it's cold here.
Right.
But, I go in the dollar store and you see people sitting in chairs, slumped over, snoring. And I asked the clerk, I said, do you feel safe in here? And she said, yeah, they just pretty much come in here and sleep.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they're out there, they're out there, the people need help.
They are. And I mean, honestly, as much as I want to just unpack everything else, because I still have so many questions, Denton.
We'll do a second version
okay.
Follow up.
Because there's so much more. And that's what I love about people. And this is what I love about doing this, is just like, there's just so much more that we can do by even just telling our stories and how we went through all of that. And we're able to keep on trucking because, man, there are a lot of people that go through stuff that they're like, oh, hands up, I'm done.
And I say there's several ways to learn. One is you can learn by somebody else's scar tissue and their stories, or you can earn that scar tissue yourself, which is more painful.
That is very true.
To be able to say, that's why we do that or don't do that. The guy told a story about this, and okay, I get it now. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
But this program you're doing, God bless you for running this series and really letting people tell their stories, and opportunity for other people to hear them and learn from them, and really look at their own lives and introspect and say, okay, who do I need to talk to get their story?
Right.
Who am I missing?
Yeah.
And some may be your relatives, and some may be people you never met ever before in your life that you're sitting next to.
Yep. And so we might have to do another one of just like unpacking life from your side of things, if I can keep my tears in check.
You've done very well.
But with that, Denton, I know that we're coming up on time. I mean, everything that you have told us and shared with us is so incredible. And I am going to be thinking about this all day in the days to come. And I really hope that all of our listeners that are listening, that they will pull their eyes up from their phone the next time they're out in public and talk to that stranger next to them. And, just start searching for those veterans, especially in Wyoming, because I know that that's where you are at and that's a big goal for you. But I mean, anywhere, and there is help. And the fact that just even thinking what your family went through in order for you to go serve the country, like, I can't imagine.
Yeah, my wife considers, soldiers her family.
Yeah.
And their spouses.
That's incredible.
And she came in at 20 years old with me.
I want to meet her.
You will.
I do. Yes.
You will.
Well, is there anything else? Because I could keep on going all day long, but is there anything else that you want to leave? Just like words of wisdom, Denton, anything that you just like want. So if one person had to take one thing away from today, like what would that be? What do you have as far as like closing thoughts?
Yeah. So, our nation, the way it is right now, the divisiveness, the turmoil, things are going on. We have to create service and service-oriented hearts to serve each other. And if we do that, we're doing things with the right state of mind, and people are going to be helped, and people are going to be taken care of, and decisions will be made with their best interest at heart. So I would say vote, one, coming up in August. I would say talk to people, find out their story, find out what they need. If you need something, ask. It's hard to ask. And a lot of times veterans wait until we have hit rock bottom because we're self-sufficient. We take care of ourselves.
Right.
Ask if you need help. There's tons of resources out there. And if you find somebody needs help, get them to the people that can help them. Be persistent on doing that.
Yeah.
And, got to get love back in our lives.
Amen to that. Amen to love back in our lives and having a servant's heart. And I know too that you guys have a website for somebody to go to as well. If I'm not mistaken,
so it's in its infancy, so patience, but it is www.cc, and this stands for Campbell County, ccveterans.org.
Yeah.
So ccveterans.org. Type that in your search, it'll pop up. And what we want to make on there is a one-stop shop to go in and find all the resources you need, points of contact, and to have links to all the different service organizations to include the VA. So somebody coming in, we can hand them a card with that on it, and off they run, and we get them started. So that's our goal, to have that place not only for the veterans, but also for the community to use to help with resources. So I appreciate you letting me say that, ccveterans.org.
And I'll make sure that link goes underneath this too, so that way people have access to it. But even though it's in its infant stages, maybe right now, I know that as people are listening to this time and time again, years down the road, Denton may not even be there anymore. It's going to still be up and still be trucking, and it'll be ready to go in that one-stop shop. Goal. And so I'm excited for you. I'm so thankful for you. And this was just so incredible. There's a very big special place in my heart for, like I said, people who have served, and thank you is not enough, but thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate it. You are welcome. Very welcome.
And thank your wife for us and your son, because that's a big deal too. I mean, they had to be willing to go with you through all of that, and support you through that. And that is a big service too.
Yeah. And real quick, suicide prevention. I lost a son.
Yeah.
And every day is hard. So, talk to people about it. It's okay to talk about suicide. If you're hurting, talk to somebody. Reach out and get rid of the stigma. Mental health is health. Yeah. Our heads are connected to our bodies. So it's important, and just keep on helping those out there. It's a tough world right now.
Yeah. It is. Thank you so much, Denton. thank you for sharing your story. And I can't wait to see all of this blooming. And man, it's going to be amazing to see ROTC happening in Gillette and
That'd be great.
finding more than 300 in the Gillette or Wyoming area right now of veterans. And you guys know how to contact Denton. You'll be able to get his contact information below, as well as all of those links. So thank you again, Denton. We sure appreciate you.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me on here, and keep doing what you're doing. I'm just love this series you got going on.
Thank you. Well, if you know of anybody else who has a story that they need to share,
I'll send
you're
them to
welcome
you.
to get a hold of me. All of you listeners, if you were inspired by Denton's story today and you want to share yours, you will have my contact information easily accessible too. Send me the highlights. We'll get you on here next, and you'll be able to help others in their health journey, mental health, physical health, emotional health, spiritual health, all of the healths. And also inspire others as Denton did here today too. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. Everybody, God bless and have a great day and weekend coming up.
Bye, guys.
Bye.